Wisconsin Public Schools sex survey goes viral after parents find out about it. Well, a viral video, I suppose, is better than all the STDs that are going viral. These kids are being groomed to catch by these programs. I'm Dr. Duke, he's Dave, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Katie is off on maternity leave, so Dave Fiorazo joins us again today. Today, we start in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which has one of the worst performing literacy rates of kids in any city in this country, and that's saying something. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where high school students were recently asked instead, how come you can't read, Johnny? Or, hey, Susie, maybe we can get you to an 8th grade level by the time you graduate high school. No, instead, they were recently asked very personal questions about sex, including whether they've had anal sex or group sex, whether they've had sex with more than 4 people. These things are what we're spending our time in 10th grade. This is apparently the sophomore I call it the sophomore sexualization. 10th graders being exposed to this. Oh, and mom and dad weren't known. See, the kids were allowed to opt out if they wanted to. Mom and dad were never consulted about this. So let's just start by rolling that footage.
Inside a classroom at Brookfield Central, the survey was direct and far from discreet. In it, students could respond to several statements, including, I have been under the influence of alcohol or drugs when having sexual intercourse, and I've had sexual intercourse with 4 or more people. The other statements are even more personal, describing the types of sex a person has had. At the Elmbrook School Board meeting Tuesday night,
this should not be asked of our 10th grade children or any children underage.
One parent wanted answers.
I asked the school board this. How would you like it if I asked you these questions? How would you feel?
The student told us it was part of the sex education portion of a health class, and students were given the option to not take part. And those who did took the survey through the digital platform Poll Everywhere. While students were given the option to not take part, parents were not consulted beforehand.
You know, I've got 2 quotes on my notes when I read this article. First of all, on the first page, what the? And then on the second page, why isn't this against the law? Some of these are minors. And
They're all minors.
This is in high school, right? A 16-year-old?
These are 10-year-olds.
10th
graders, I should say.
Okay, 10th
None of them
graders.
are 18.
15, 16.
Yeah. None of them are 18.
Why can you do this in school, but you walk up to a kid on the street and start asking, you'll be arrested.
That's right. Well, look, if I invite a kid, a 15-year-old into my living room to talk about anal intercourse, I'm getting arrested as some kind of a...
Exactly.
Right? But in the public schools, and this is so many tentacles to this. The first one is this outrageous data gathering business we've been talking about ever since Common Core and really go back to No Child Left Behind and the 1990s with the Clintons, the Goals 2000. We've really created a technology big brother situation in our public schools, where what our kids think, what they do, what they say, what they eat, who they sleep with, whether they've been drunk or not. These are now things that all sorts of data is being compiled on our kids, whether you know it or not. These polls are not teaching. They don't teach the kids anything. What they do is they give data to feed the grist of the mill that funds this kind of radical sexual education. This doesn't do anything for learning. This doesn't teach the kids anything. It's just very invasive and very, very disturbing. And again, the fact that the moms and dads only had to find out from the kids after the fact is pretty shocking.
And do they justify this by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the youth risk behavior? How do they justify asking these kind of questions?
Well, they don't justify. If they had a justification, they wouldn't hide it from the parents, right? This is invasive. Mm-hmm. This is part of a liberal agenda to start tracking our kids. And look, the other thing I would say is if we are sexualizing kids as young as 5 and 6 years old, teaching little kids that touching themselves is perfectly normal as little children. By the time they get into early middle school, telling them that touching yourself is a safer way of having sex than having sex. But if you're going to have sex, then be protected, right? We're not telling these kids not to do it. We're not associating morality or religion or spirituality or basic human self-respect to any of these questions anymore. Mm-hmm. You're basically a sexual animal from the moment you're born, so we're going to teach you to be as sexual as you can. And if you're doing that with kids as young as 6 6 and 7 and 8 years old, then at some point you're setting these kids up for these questions, right? Why in one recent poll that I saw, or piece of data that I saw, 20 and 25% of American kids between the ages of 12 and 18 had some sort of sexually transmitted disease already. This is what you get. If you're going to sexualize kids, then you got to get kids to, part of the poll is to break down resistance, right? Is to break down modesty. Asking kids, have you had anal sex, right? With these four, if you slept with 4 or more people by the time you're 12, how many of them did you have anal sex with? You're breaking down their modesty and reserve, right? So, and that breakdown then leads to more sexual activity. It actually leads to bullying kids who don't take the poll or aren't sexualized. It puts huge pressure on kids. The whole thing, and all of it ends up at Planned Parenthood sooner or later.
Exactly.
The abortion, the condoms.
Because they do testing.
The testing, the gonorrhea shot, they all end up in your where the local Planned Parenthood makes all kinds of money off your kids.
Big time. Now, they get money every time a kid comes in just to get tested. And if you're pregnant, that's boom, big money for them.
And don't forget, too, Planned Parenthood is taking that money. This is your taxpayer money that the schools are using now. That money goes to Planned Parenthood. They create their own radical sexual curriculum, of which I guarantee you, to some degree, this poll was funded. Mm-hmm. If not this poll, other polls like it are funded by groups like Planned Parenthood, right? They're in every aspect of this with the kids.
Explain how this works, this poll everywhere thing where there's instant results, or they can...
So yeah, apparently they do these tests on their phones, and so they're able to see an aggregate score at the end. So they do have that. As other people, including the video, pointed out, this leads to peer pressure, right? Because you now know what your other kids are doing or not doing, right? And if 67% of kids in your own class reported having engaged in this kind of sex and you haven't, that's one more thing, right, that you feel bad about. Well, and isn't it interesting that we don't mind bullying in the name of bullying? We got to throw out American history. We got to have a complete 1619 overhaul. We've got to get rid of words like man and woman. We've got to teach kids that their gender is completely malleable. Also, they won't be bullied. But when it comes to radical sexual experience for 9th and 10th graders, they have no problem humiliating kids with these survey results.
Hope you're not eating dinner. The next story, an Arkansas teacher is on leave for allegedly forcing a 5-year-old to pull feces out of the toilet with his bare hands. Now, these are allegations, but Ashley Murray's 5-year-old son came home from Crystal Hill Elementary School in Little Rock earlier this week and told her what happened, leaving her horrified. Let's listen to what the mother said.
Ashley Murray says she was horrified when her 5-year-old told her what happened at school.
They basically made him go in the toilet and get his feces and tissue, the dirty tissue, out of the toilet.
Ashley's son is a kindergartner at Crystal Hill Elementary School. Meanwhile, Ashley says the teacher called her personally.
When she got on the phone with me, she said she didn't have an explanation. She just knew she was wrong. But she stated to the principal that she was trying to teach him how not to stop up the toilet.
Yeah, apparently in this school, there's at least in this classroom, there's a toilet that is overly prone to backing up. Apparently, it has a problem with that, and so this is an ongoing problem in that classroom. Little kids go to the bathroom, and little kids can be sometimes exuberant in their use of toilet paper, and then this leads to a clog. So I'm sure this annoyed the teacher to no end, and she thought that she was going to teach the kid a lesson. I'm not going to do it. We're not going to call the janitor to do it. This is on you. You get in there, and the kid's 5 years old.
Oh.
There's more to this story. I mean, let me philosophize as I often do in stories like this. Just suggest, over and above the stupidity of all of this, he's a little black kid. Why is this not a bigger deal, right? Why is this story not a bigger deal? The only thing I can think of is that the teacher must be black too.
Yeah,
but if you had a white teacher, if it's true that you had a white teacher who did this to a little black kid, forced him back into the bathroom, where is the slave talk? Where is the kind of thing we're treating kids like it's 1850 in this country?
CNN
right?
would have been all over.
You would think that. So that's, I don't know the race of the teacher, but that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I want to go in a way that probably most people won't with this, and that is to suggest that this is really like the first story, right? All of that radical sex talk for 10th graders is a way of breaking them down. It is a way of reassociating them, stripping away things like modesty and humility. Think about it. We're breeding a generation of kids who have no modesty, no sexual restraint. They are taught that they should go for it, that it is somehow oppressive if they hold back or they have scruples, that they have to strip themselves of all the moral scaffolding that comes with Christianity. I think the other side of that is what you're seeing here. We're treating that little boy like he's an animal, like a dog. You think about the way dogs roll in their own feces or will eat the dog poop of other animals or other dogs. We're treating this little boy like a glorified animal. When you get rid of God, you get rid of spirituality from our education system, everything becomes purely materialistic. Human beings are nothing more than highly evolved animals. So if that's all we are, if it's all we are is highly evolved animals, there's really no ultimate thing as morality or right or wrong. There really is no use for things like guilt and shame and modesty. If that's true, then what's the difference between having anal intercourse with your 10th grade girlfriend and sticking your hand down a toilet? I mean, we're breeding these kids to believe that they're nothing but animalistic creatures.
In the end of the story, there's a girl that this happened to as well, so it wasn't just this one instance. But the only humorous thing I thought in the story, because it's kind of sad, but this first mother told her mother, and so the grandmother took to social media to try to get media attention on this thing. So grandma's out there on social media. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Grandma, think about it. Mom didn't know what to do. The kid did. How would the kid know?
5 years old.
5 years old. The kid. Why would the kid know that this is a problem? Especially if his teacher's sitting in there. So it took the grandma. I guarantee a grandma. Well, it's Arkansas, so maybe the grandma's like 40 years old, right? I mean, I'm not thinking like a 75-year-old granny here. I have relatives in Arkansas, for God's sake. Grandma probably means 39 and a half.
Oh, boy.
And so still, at 39 and a half, 40, grandma in Arkansas is old enough to have remembered a time before we treated kids like little animals and sent them in to stick their hand elbow deep into a toilet full of poop.
I can't touch that one.
Very MC Hammer of you.
In our next story, a 6th grade choir teacher separates kids into privileged and targeted groups in a lesson on oppression. A middle school choir teacher in Minnesota recently taught a class full of 6th graders about various types of oppression by separating students into privileged and targeted categories during what the school called a social-emotional lesson. The revelation is just the latest example of educators and administrators force-feeding critical race theory and this progressive ideology, social engineering. It's not going to stop, is it?
Yeah, perhaps I wouldn't have used the word force-feeding right after that poop story. Coperophagia. We are going to go and ignore that, and we're going to talk about this story, and this story tells the same tragic tale, right? We've been talking about social emotional learning, which really became prominent in America with the rise of Common Core about 12, 13 years ago. And social emotional learning is the idea that we're going to teach kids, right, not necessarily for academic achievement, not ABCs and 1 through 2, 3s, not to prepare them for career. No, we're going to use education as a tool to manipulate them sociologically, psychologically, and emotionally to become the kind of good little liberals we want them to be. Shameless. So social emotional learning does go hand in hand with Common Core and what came before it. It's a way of avoiding the real business of the classroom. Still, how many moms and dads in America? I'll bet you if you gave a survey, a mandatory survey to every single mother and father who have kids in public school, 60 million of them, and you asked them to write in one sentence, what is the primary purpose of school? I'll bet you 95% would say learning. Learning math, learning science, learning to be a literate person. That's not what they're doing anymore. I mean, social emotional learning explains something. It's a choir class, for God's sake. It's a choir class. Kids get together and sing. And you know, the irony is that when we think of choir, we always think of spiritual singing, right? We don't think of choirs when we think of Madonna with 16 background singers on stage. We think of choir almost and in every way in the context of church. And in this school, choir in progressive Minnesota, I guarantee you they're not singing Negro spirituals. I guarantee you they're not singing the good, amazing grace. Nevertheless, at choir class, you'd think they'd be free from this. Your kid comes home from school and he shows you his schedule for the semester, and he's taken math and science and social studies and history, and you're freaking out. What are they going to teach him in all of those? Oh my God, I have to watch what every night I have to grill this kid and what he learned in his health class. The last thing on earth you would think would be poisoned with this garbage is choir. And yet here we are. And go ahead and explain the assignment. There's not a single thing in the assignment that has anything to do with singing.
No, it's just about to separate kids into privileged or targeted, and this is a lesson plan. This wasn't this choir instructor's idea out of the blue. The chart listed 5 types of oppression for the students' consideration: racism, sexism, religious expression, or oppression, I should say, heterosexism, and xenophobia.
Now look at the chart. Again, this is a choir course, but look at this. Look at the assumptions. Racism, we always assume that you're white. Can't be anybody else. If you're white, then you're a racist. And if you're not white, if you're a people of color, black, Asian, native, Latinx, then you are victimized. Sexism, only men.
Yep.
Only men, right? That's how we allow people to get away with toxic masculinity, right? Targeting men, bigoted generalizations about men. This one burns me down. Religious oppression, Christians and Protestants.
Separates them.
Dave, you're our biblical specialist.
Yes.
If Christians are Christians, then what religion are Protestants?
I thought they were Christians.
Funny you meant. Tell me this is not. Go back to that chart. Tell me this is not true. I all my life have seen Christian/Catholic. Right? Have you seen that? I've seen that. The implication that Catholics aren't really Christians.
Okay. Yeah.
This is the first time I've ever seen Protestants listed that way.
Yep.
Right? But notice who the victims are.
Muslims and others.
Wow. Notice in all the other categories, you get multiple options, right?
Yeah.
They want you to know that Christianity and Protestantism is by definition biased against Islam. Can I ask you a historical question, Dave? You're a pretty read the paper kind of guy.
Try.
Were you alive in 9/11?
Yes.
You were, right?
Yes.
You weren't born yet?
I know I was here.
You just got, okay, young enough?
No, I've been here for a while.
Okay,
by 9/11.
Just checking. Can you think of any historical moments at which Islamic people targeted other people? Is it
historical moments?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been constant in their history.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Islamic people, like radical Muslims targeting other...
I'm being totally facetious.
Yeah.
That's my hyperbolical way of saying WTF, kids, right? That go back to the chart. Targeting Muslims, the targeted group
is
of religious oppression is Muslims. And how do you broach this topic without laughing out loud, given that Muslims do as much targeting or more than all the collective religions of the world combined? But you can't talk about that's not here, not in this country, Dr. Pastor. In this country, Muslims have a heart. Can you name one mosque that was burnt down?
No.
I can't. Even after 9/11, we were warned by these same social justice warriors after 9/11 that, oh my God, here comes we're going to start winding up Muslims or deporting them. It never happened.
Well, isn't that one of the reasons that Muslims are here as a targeted group? Because they overcompensated because of 9/11. We didn't want to offend Muslims and blame the whole Muslim group, right?
Many Muslims that came to this country as refugees.
Yeah.
So in other words, they were oppressed by Muslims being targeted by other Muslims.
Elsewhere.
Muslims being targeted by Muslims required Muslim refugees to come here.
That's history.
Muslims being targeted by other Muslims, like what's her name? Ilhan Omar, right? Yeah. She was in Somalia. Her family was brutalized in Somalia by invading Muslim armies. She ran away here to become a congressman. And who does she stand up for? Muslims, right? So look, fine. You want to call Christians and then Protestants, whatever religion that is, you want to call them oppressors, do it. But to hide this behind and go back one more time to the chart. Muslims and others. So the only ones that really matter are Muslims, right? Because, no one picks on Buddhists in this country, and no one picks on Hindus, and no one picks really. You know who's not there that should be there? Way more than Muslims is Jews.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
what does it tell you about the anti-Semitic left that they couldn't even add the word Jew because Jews are white people, according to these people? Now, this is what gets me. Jews are white people when it comes to racism, but they're not when it comes to other kinds of discrimination. And then we're being told that Jesus, who was a Jew, had to be dark-skinned. You put all those things together, and in that mishmash, you see exactly how incoherent liberalism is. Welcome to Paradise Lost Week for Instant Classics. Yes. Some real education, the kind of things that your kids would get if we had a serious university system in this country. I read Paradise Lost as a sophomore in high school. Let me compare that. I was a sophomore in high school when I read Paradise Lost. Start with our first story of the day. These 10-year-olds, this 10th grade, sophomore year, these kids are being questioned on how much anal intercourse they had. I was reading Paradise Lost. They were talking about anal intercourse. Let that sink in. So we're going to give you a little bit of Milton's Paradise Lost today. We looked at the prologue to the poem last time. I want to look at, also from book 1 of Paradise Lost, this is the moment that Satan, the evil malefactor in the book, the one who is going to try to tempt Adam and Eve, the one who warred against God, he wakes up after having lost the battle in heaven. He wakes up and finds himself in hell for the first time, and he sneaks out of hell to try to find where Adam and Eve are. He realizes that they can no longer fight God, that these fallen angels who have now become demons, he used to be Lucifer, the brightest of the angels. Now he's Satan, right? Or the Hasatan, the one who accuses. They can't fight God anymore, but what they can do instead is try to destroy God's creatures. If they can corrupt Adam and Eve and turn them towards hell, that will have been a victory for them, one that they assume would hurt God immensely. So here's where Satan is trying to come to grips with the horror of where he is, what hell is. And in one of the great speeches, Satan, as he looks around, he says, "Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwells." He knows, he can't lie about it. He knows what he gave up in heaven. "Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwells. Hail, horrors, hail, infernal world, and thou profoundest hell, receive thy new king, thy new possessor. One who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time." And what a profound observation, the devil says. The mind is its own place and can in itself make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What does it matter where we are, he says, if I be still the same? And what should I be, all but less than he whom thunder had made greater? I stood toe to toe with God. I may have lost, but I stood toe to toe with God. Here, at least, the devil says, we shall be free. Oh, yes, we're in the armpit of the universe. We're in hell. We're in the opposite of everything that God made true and beautiful, but we'll make it ours, right? Here, at least, we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy. He will not drive us hence from here. What could be worse? Here we may reign secure. And in my choice, to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to be king in hell than to be a slave to God in heaven. Powerful business. All right, just a quick reminder to please download our Freedom Project Media app. All you have to do is search Freedom Project in your app store and make sure to allow notifications. And if you're a fan of the show, we ask you to consider just a one-time tax-deductible donation to support the Patriot Club. That's where we take money to support the show after YouTube and Facebook and all the other social media have demonetized us. We create great content that people watch. They're advertised in places like YouTube. YouTube gets all that money. We get nothing because they don't like our worldview. Your one-time $99 donation, tax deductible, helps us to do what we're doing, okay? So we'll send you our signature tumbler on top of that. To do this, visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. Now, also want to take a moment to show a little love to our Patriot members. Today, we'd like to give a shout out to Ted from Lenexa, Kansas. Ted, on the prairie. Rock Chalk Jayhawk. And that wraps up this show. Don't forget to check out the latest episode of Dave's show, Christ and Culture, tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. He's Dave. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.